Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is April Whitlock with Fundanoodle, and I'm so excited to come to you again today for a third version of our Fundanoodle 5. We are getting ready to introduce you to two amazing women who are going to talk about sensory processing. They've just recently published a great book, and we're going to talk about the importance of sensory processing in handwriting. So I'm going to bring them both up, and first of all, I want to, we got everybody here. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but right on time, everybody's together. So I want to make sure everybody's on. And again, just to let you guys remind you, if you're new to joining us with Fundanoodle and Fundanoodle 5, what we do is every other week, we try to bring you experts in the field of early education and early learning, and we ask them 5 questions about a particular topic. So we have had some fun already talking about the importance of handwriting and reading. We've talked about the importance of computer skills and how computer skills and handwriting are coordinate to really make strong learners. And today we're going to be focusing on sensory processing and handwriting. So let me take just a second to introduce you to our 2 experts. They are both the, I will give you both their bios, but they're both the authors of a new book that's out called Sensory Processing Explained, a handbook for parents and educators. And there's a link in the comments after you watch this. I'm sure you're going to want to buy this book and have it as a handy reference. And there's a link in the comments that you can do that. So first of all, Heather and Sharla, hi. Thanks so much for joining us. So glad you guys can be with me today. Heather, over here on the far left, wave. Heather Greutman is a therapy blogger behind a blog and Facebook page called Growing Hands-On Kids, where she encourages independence one activity at a time, which we are big believers in at Fundanoodle, making confident, independent little learners. She uses her experience as an occupational therapy assistant to provide resources, education, and activities for those working with or raising kids of all abilities. Her site focuses on child development, occupational therapy tips, hands-on activity ideas, sensory processing and behavior, fine motor skills, handwriting, and much more. She is married to David, and they have 2 children ages 5 and 2, so she's right in the mix of all this early learning. Heather, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then we also have here in the middle, we have Sharla Kostelyk. I told you I'd mess that up. I always do under pressure. She's the mother of 4 boys and 3 girls, so lots of experience there. She is passionate about empowering parents, adoption, and quality chocolate. Now, there's a woman after my own heart, or definitely after my 15-year-old's heart, because she is the chocolate one in the house. She is also the reluctant but now loving owner of many pets. Sharla blogs about adoption, special needs, parenting, and sensory at the Chaos and Clutter. She lives with her husband and children in Canada. Welcome, Sharla. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to get started. We are talking again about sensory processing and handwriting. So let's start with our first question. It seems pretty obvious. Our first question, what is sensory processing?
Yeah, so sensory processing is really how our bodies interpret everything around us in our environment and even inside our bodies. So everything's connected, everything interacts with each other. So if you think of your central nervous system going down your spine, it's connected to your brain. The nerves are connected in all your muscles, all your organs, skin, like everything is connected, and all that information gets sent through those nerves up to your brain, and then your brain interprets that information and tells your body how to respond to it. So if you have a central nervous system or sensory processing that is all connected and firing on all cylinders, then it's going to interpret that information correctly and tell your body the appropriate response. If it's not, then you're going to see some responses that aren't, don't fall in line with the information that you're getting. So there's really 8 main senses. I know we learn a lot about the 5 senses, but there's actually 8. And so I thought I would go over those 8 just really quickly, just kind of give you a brief one-liner on what each one is.
Awesome.
And then we'll kind of get into those more when we talk about handwriting in response to sensory processing. But the first one that a lot of us, of course, know is gustatory or taste. And so that's any information coming in through your mouth, your tongue. And that one is tied very closely to your olfactory system or smell, because we smell first and then we taste. So those two kind of go hand in hand. And then, of course, your auditory system, which is your hearing. So anything coming in through your ears. Visual, which is sight, anything through your eyes. Tactile, which is touch. So anything with your hands, skin, muscles, that type of thing. And then the three that you may not know as well are proprioception. And this one kind of tells you how your body is in relation to space, so in relation to things around you. Those receptors are found in your muscles and joints. And then your vestibular system is kind of your sense of balance. The vestibular system is actually located in the inner ear. So it's kind of like this liquid fluid that whenever your head turns, your body's like, oh, okay, I'm sideways. I'm hanging upside down. I'm standing up straight. I'm sitting. It's kind of like almost like a GPS system is kind of the easy way to think about it. And then the last one, which is actually, I did not know about this one until a couple years ago. I know Sharla also didn't, and I learned about it in a continuing education class. It's called Interoception. And this is the sense of inside your body. So like feeling your heartbeat. Are you thirsty? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Are you hungry? Are you too hot? Are you too cold? All those types of internal senses is in the interoception system. And all of these are connected. You have to have them kind of all working together to have that best optimal level of arousal in order to process things correctly and do tasks appropriately.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I love learning something new every day. I mean, learning 3 more senses I didn't know about, which is awesome. So thank you for that. Now let's go on. Now that we know what sensory processing is, great explanation. How can learning about sensory processing help parents and teachers with their students and with their children?
Sharla, do you want to address parents first?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about parents because that's something I'm a bit of an expert on. 5 of our 7 kids have sensory processing disorder. So, and it presents in each one of them differently, just like it will in all kids. And before I learned about sensory processing, I thought that our daughter's behaviors were just basically to make my life difficult.
I've been there and understand that.
I did not understand that she was actually having so much trouble navigating the world around her because of the challenges she had with her senses and sensory processing. Once I was able to understand sensory processing and how it was affecting her and what her sensory needs were, our life changed dramatically. Not just her life, but all of our lives, and our family changed dramatically. And it made such a difference in our home that I really felt passionate about helping other parents understand what a difference this could make for their children as well. And it's just helped all of our kids. So as a parent, once you understand sensory processing, you can help your child to learn their own sensory preferences and their own sensory needs. You can help them advocate for themselves. You can help advocate for them with, school and with friends and other parents and different activities that your child is doing. You can prevent meltdowns. And I know that this is one that all parents are going to be like, really?
Yeah.
Secret sauce, right? So that's a big one. And that's been pretty key for us. You can just help your child to recognize their own needs and help them to express what their sensory needs are, and then help them to be able to just thrive instead of struggle.
Which is what we want as parents, right? We want to do whatever we can to help them thrive.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Heather, from the teacher standpoint?
Yeah, so from a teacher perspective, and just a little background, I worked in the public school system as an OT assistant before I decided to stay home with my kids. So I've kind of been in a lot of classrooms and worked with different teachers on this. But in the classroom, of course, we have a lot more challenges because you have 25, 30 kids, and each child, as Sharla mentioned, is going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. So you might have one child that has a hard time processing things auditory and has a hard time listening to directions. You have another child who is just constantly bouncing up and down in their seat. They can't sit still no matter what you try. And so it's important as a teacher to be able to understand that all of these children are, sometimes these behaviors, a lot of the times, are sensory related, and you can address those in your classroom. Not just for children that are struggling, but for all children, because each one of us has our own sensory preferences and the ways that we process things better. And so understanding that and being able to see that in the kids that you teach is important to be able to help them to succeed in the classroom, because we all want them, to do the best that they can in the classroom. And so I think addressing sensory needs is a big step in that.
And I agree with you 100%. And I think it's one of the things, when we talk about all of the different pieces that are important to giving a child the optimal environment to be successful, whether at home or in the classroom, parents a lot of times skip over certain things, especially if they haven't received a specific diagnosis of a sensory issue. But it is like what you were just saying, it's all of it. I mean, as an adult, I'm sitting here thinking, there's definite ways that I like things versus not, and being able to understand that from our kids, and that they're not just trying to drive us crazy, that they really, it is something that's impacting them that we need to pay attention to. So thank you for that. And I know your book really will help people understand more. So question number 3. So now that we understand sensory processing and we know that it's something that we need to, as leaders, whether we're leading in the classroom or leading at home, that we need to address, what can parents do? How can they support all the different sensory processing needs, whether at home, or how can a teacher support those children in the classroom?
So I'll talk a little bit about what parents can do and how parents can meet those needs. And again, those needs are going to be really specific based on your child and their sensory preferences. But there are things that you can do as a parent, from everything from sleep to eating and feeding and dressing, toileting, all of those things. And one of the things is really to provide a lot of opportunity for sensory input. So some of that is going to be providing sensory activities, and some of that is going to be actually changing your child's environment by changing the home and making it very sensory friendly. And that's going to be specific to your child. So for one of our daughters who just has sensory overload from everything visual in particular, we need to have her room be very bare bones. She can't have decorations in her room and a lot of color and a lot of clutter or anything. Her room just has to really be like a bed, and a certain color on the walls even to make it soothing for her. Whereas one of our sons who really struggles with auditory sensory processing, he needs to use noise-canceling headphones to be able to sleep or to be able to go out into public places where it's going to be really noisy. So the needs are going to be different based on your child, but there's so many ways that you can make your home sensory friendly. And of course, I can't go into all of those today, but you can find those in the book. But there are ways that you can, even today, just think about your child and observe them and observe what you think their sensory struggles are, and then think of ways that you can adapt your home and the environment to helping your child with those needs.
That's great. Heather, what about the classroom? Can't get quite as specific in the classroom.
Right. In the classroom, it's a little harder because you have to take into consideration all your students. So you may have some that have trouble with visual or auditory, and then you may have others who just need that input. So it's kind of hard to find that balance. I mean, it's something, and again, like each year is going to be different because you're going to have different students. So I think Sharla touched on something that was really important too, is to just really observe and just see, you know, what are some of the triggers that are kind of causing these behaviors that you're seeing in the classroom. Is there a certain time of day? Is there a certain activity that seems to set it off? A lot of times transitions are a big one. A lot of students have trouble transitioning from ending something and then transitioning to something else, especially if they're that type of student that has to finish what they're working on before they move on. That's a hard one. So just really thinking about how you can support those students. Visuals are a great way, I mean, not just for those that struggle with auditory input, but for any child, just to see like a visual schedule of the day, what's going to be happening, what's coming up next, just so that they know what to expect. And then also a big one is just allow movement and brain breaks in your classroom. So many students are just, most kids are not meant to just sit, you know, in a classroom for these extended periods of time. And so they need to be able to get up and move, especially outside. And I know that's hard, especially with a lot of schools cutting recess and just not getting that outside time. But if there's any way that you can incorporate outside time into your classroom, I think that's really important. And if you can't, you know, take breaks, really about every 15 to 20 minutes, you know, kids need to be up and moving and changing positions just to keep that optimal level of arousal up so that they can focus and that they can learn the way they're supposed to. There's lots of great ways that you can incorporate brain breaks. There's lots of, I know some schools it's hard to get YouTube channels to work inside the classroom, but you can even use DVDs. There's little brain break cards you can have in a jar. And then just a visual schedule can be as simple as writing something out. If you have students that aren't quite reading yet, you can use pictures. Yeah. So yeah, just little things like that. Having like a calming area in your classroom, just a place where a student can go if they're struggling and just calm their bodies down. And like a rocking chair or just even a beanbag chair. You can find these inexpensively at like a secondhand shop. You can ask your parent-teacher association to help you with funding for different things. Because I know that's another issue too, is, you know, finding, because we're all spending our own money, you know, on these things, of course. So just little fidgets and just things that they can use to help them focus. The fidgets, you just have to be careful and, you know, make sure that kids know that this is a tool and not a toy. Right. And so it's not something that they can use to distract other students, that it needs to be used for just them. Right. So there's, again, we go into lots of different things in the book. We have a section specifically for teachers and then also a section specifically for parents.
That's great. Now, and one of the things I'll have to say is, again, like you touched on, every child developmentally needs some of the ideas that you're throwing out. Yeah. You know, the movement is a big one. I loved my daughter's first grade teacher this year and being able to see just how she really segmented the day, even in a long 45-minute block of literacy, how they moved, you know, from different station to station on a regular basis. And it kept them moving and working with different people and engaged. And you're right, the children need much more than that, much more than just sitting at a desk for these long periods of times. They definitely need those movement pieces. And big fan of the schedule, even for my 15-year-old, with you know, some of her processing issues still at 15, we still thank God for the iPhone and the family calendars, because we need it all laid out what's going to happen, you know, today. So big fan of both of those ideas. So our next question here, number 4. So specifically in our world at Fundanoodle, we are all about hands-on learning and really about making sure that we give parents and caregivers and teachers the tools they need to help their little learners master letter formation and number formation, because we believe handwriting is the key to educational success. It's the key to being a great reader. It's just there's so much there. So let's talk specifically with question 4 about how does sensory processing impact and affect handwriting?
Yeah, so when you think about handwriting, it's not just being able to sit there and hold the pencil. There's lots of other skills that come into play. And so just a few of those are a fine motor, a visual motor, which is using your eyes and hands motor skills together. Visual perceptual, so being able to look at something and recreate it or being able to tell what it is. Ocular motor, which is the way your eyes move. So very similar to reading, you know, we write from left to right, top to bottom. And then upper body strength and postural control. So being able to sit up in the right, you know, not slumped over, not, you know, leaning on your, right. Yep, everybody check your posture.
Here we go.
Yeah, so not, you know, slouching over, not leaning on your hand while you're writing, just being able to sit there and hold the pencil appropriately. Bilateral coordination, which is using both sides of your body together. So being able to hold the paper with one hand and then writing with the other. And then motor planning, which is a big one. You know, what do I do with the pen or pencil? How do I move my arm? How do I hold it appropriately? And then sensory integration, which kind of ties all of this together, because as we talked about, the central nervous system and sensory processing is kind of like that bottom level. And if you look up, sorry, I've got a cough here coming. I'm giving it over bronchitis, so I apologize.
Oh, no. No worries.
All right. I was hoping it would last longer than this, but anyways. So there's a really great chart that you can Google. If you Google the pyramid of learning, it kind of looks like this. But at the very bottom is the central nervous system. And then it lists all of the 8 senses. And so all of those kind of have to be kind of in tune and working correctly in order to build the other levels. And academic learning is at the very top. So all of these underlying things have to be kind of at the right level in order for a child to be able to be successful and to be able to have that academic learning, cognition for all that. So handwriting, you know, plays a big part with sensory processing. And there's actually a statistic that 25 to 33% of students struggle with handwriting. And so that's a big number, like when you think about it. And schools are not focused on handwriting like they used to be. A lot of the times you might get a packet over the summer, or it just might be very brief. And then depending on what type of handwriting or curriculum they're using, they might be learning different ways to write, and then another teacher will teach a different way. And right. So it can be confusing to try and go back and forth. And so handwriting is, you know, very complex. And so you have to kind of have all these different things that I mentioned, like the motor control and the visual perceptual and visual motor all kind of working together. And so if you have a child that's struggling with the sensory processing piece, a lot of the times you'll see them not being able to focus on handwriting. They get distracted. They have poor posture, so you'll see them slouched over, and that will affect their legibility and also their writing speed, because they're either writing too slow or they're writing too fast, and so they're not able to get out what they want to write. Their brain is kind of moving ahead of where their body is, or they're just, they just struggle to hold the pencil. That's another big one. A lot of the times that's what teachers would come to me for in the classrooms, because the student was not holding the pencil appropriately. So just all that kind of plays in how they're going to do letter formations down the road.
And it's so key, you know, that's one of the biggest things we believe in starting as young at 2.5 is building that bottom foundation, building those foundations up before ever putting the pencil in the hand of a child. And so many parents don't understand that, and you know, and don't realize that the school environment looks very different today. That there is really an expectation that a child's walking into kindergarten with the ability to write, you know, with all those skills in place. Is even the schools that have strong curriculum, even the schools that use Fundanoodle for that matter. It's 3 weeks at the beginning of the school year, and then it's on to the next thing. And if the child hasn't had the support at home or in a TK or a preschool environment of building up not just the letter formation piece, not just the writing piece, but the actual building up of the hand strength and the hand-eye coordination and all the sensory pieces that you just touched on, then they're really kind of lost already at the beginning of the kindergarten, which is a tragic place for a child to be.
Yeah, and even like it's not even really developmentally appropriate for them to come into kindergarten being able to write, because they need to have all this pre-stuff done first, and especially the pre-writing line part, being able to form lines, top to bottom, left to right, all their shapes. That all comes first. And so most kids are not finished developing that until around age 5. But we're expecting them to come into kindergarten already writing all their letters. And so I think it's also important for parents to realize, if your child's in kindergarten and not writing yet, you don't have to freak out. They're fine. Like, they're going to get it. And as long as you're, supporting them at home and working with the teachers, they will get it. And some kids, it may take them a little bit longer, and some may get it sooner. It depends. So. Right.
So last question here, and this is one I think great. We hear from both of you, from the parent side and from the classroom side, but what are some activity ideas for incorporating sensory develop with the handwriting, for putting the sensory piece and the handwriting piece together? What are some ideas you can share with our listeners and watchers?
Well, the more senses that you can incorporate into activity, the better the child is going to be able to retain that. And so if you can incorporate more than just the sense of sight or the sense of touch, then that is going to help them even more. So where we might all know that you can have the child trace shapes or letters into sand or salt in a tray, if you're able to make that sand or salt scented with, something like lavender or something, then you're able to incorporate another sense, and that is just going to help cement that even further for the child. So, incorporating the senses in ways like having them shape Play-Doh or slime. Again, if you can add a scent into that, you're adding another sense. So you're just going to make it that much more effective. So having them use Play-Doh mats to shape the Play-Doh or slime into letters or shapes, or even just lines, because again, we're going back to making that foundation and back to the fine motor and the hand strength and all of those things. So things like that, or using sandpaper or string or different textures to shape shapes or letters, or just following, having them, make different lines, different shaped lines on into something like Play-Doh. They don't even have to shape the actual Play-Doh. Even having kids play in a sensory bin. And with my kids, we always did kind of, some alphabet themed sensory bins and things like that. So they're just seeing the letters, which is helping them to, make those foundations. And at the same time, they're using all of their senses in the sensory bin and pouring and scooping, which might not seem like it has anything to do with letter formation. But again, we're just, working on those fine motor and hand strength and all of those things. So it all does come together to make it so that even those really fun sensory activities that don't seem to be about learning are in fact about learning.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I think that is huge. I just have to say, that's huge, because that's what I hear from preschool teachers then when they ask us to come in and talk to their parents, it's, you need to explain to the parents why we're cutting so much, why we spend so much time cutting. You need to help the parents understand that what they're doing over here, it's foundational for learning. And I think somewhere along the way, we've just missed that, or we've just stopped understanding that play and hands-on play is the foundation for being successful in the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. So for classroom, again, getting back to that movement piece, when you think about handwriting and how you kind of hold the pencil, proprioception is a big part of that, because you have to be able to feel where your arm is on the paper and how it's moving, where you need to move next. So any type of gross motor activity that can involve proprioception, which is the input getting into your muscles and joints. So jumping, even being in a different position, so not necessarily sitting at a desk, but maybe laying on your stomach. And again, a lot of kids come in to classroom and they have a hard time sitting up. And so if you can get them in a different position where they're working on those core muscles to kind of build some strength in those, that's going to be even better. So like laying on your stomach to do your handwriting, and then just learning about letters and shapes and kind of how they feel in your body. So, you know, making your body into a letter A, making your body into a letter C, those types of things. And that's why I'm going to kind of pull in some of the Fundanoodle pieces of this. But that's why I really like our muscle mover cards, because on the one side you have the movement, and all of these movements are very specific. These were all developed by OTs, and so they kind of understand that movement piece behind handwriting. And so all these movements are very specific ones that will help kids with kind of all these foundational skills. And then they can flip it over and work on the corresponding letter. And so you could use these with at home in the classroom. You could set up a station with them with like the Play-Doh, Wiki sticks, slime, that type of stuff. And then, yeah, the lowercase one too. I didn't bring the other ones with me because they would get too cluttered here. But the pounding kit is another great one because you're getting that input in through the arm by pounding. And I know it's out of stock right now, but when it comes back into stock, you're going to want to get your hands on it because it's really great.
And it's really good when you mentioned in the classroom a sensory break area. I know we have lots of teachers that have set that up in the corner and specifically for that as a way to be able to allow a student to take a break, have that sensory engagement, and then come back and join the class.
Right, yeah, because when you think about it, when they're sitting there hammering, they're getting that input in through their arm, so all kind of that deep pressure through their arm, and that's a calming kind of sense. That deep pressure. So that's great for a sensory break. And then just the magnets, the get the wiggles out game, all those are great ones to have in the classroom as well. And then just for other things like what Sharla mentioned, you can set all those things up as a station, like a sensory break station. When a child gets done early with an activity and they're kind of waiting on the rest of their classmates, you can have little activity bags with all these things kind of just waiting for them to do something so they can kind of fill the time.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's our 5 questions. Thank you guys so much. Now, I know, like I said, I was talking to somebody else today from Smart Start about, this topic and all of our topic and how there's so much information. So thanks for, highlighting a lot of it, but definitely I want to encourage everyone to go to the link in the comments and buy their book. So you will have lots of specific details and examples that you can use to incorporate whether you're a parent or a teacher or, or both, because the one thing that I've learned over the last few years is a lot of what's going on in the classroom, it can be easily replicated at home and vice versa, so that there's this hands-on learning piece, this development piece that's so important can just keep happening in the classroom and at home. And Heather, one thing I would love to ask, if you could also put a link to the pyramid that you showed, if you could, that would be great, just so people can click on that, because I think it's very eye-opening for a parent to be able to see that and understand all that has to happen down here before the academic success truly happens. So,
definitely, yes.
I'm grateful for both of you for giving us your time. We're right here at our 30 minutes where we try to keep everything. If people will be promoting this more and sharing, so we'll look for people, if you're watching now, we didn't watch live or you're watching later, you have any questions for our guests, then please just type them in the comments and we'll make sure they get answered. So thank you again, Heather and Sharla, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who has watched, and I really appreciate your time today. So everyone have a great afternoon, and if you're anywhere where Heather and I are, please find somewhere to cool down and find some fun indoor activities with your kids, because the first day of summer feels like it's been summer for 3 weeks already. And go inside and work on those motor skills. Everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.